Thank you for watching this publication by student reporters at Denali Public High School. We will be interviewing certain guests about the U.S. defense industry, specifically the military-industrial complex and its implications on our foreign policy.
So for our first guest, we have Mr. Ellerkamp, who is our AP US history teacher, and he will give a broad generalization of the topic.
My name is Peter Ellerkamp, and I am the AP US history teacher here at Denali.
So our first question is, what are some ways defense industry corporations can maintain their grip on decision-making on a national scale?
I think what's good for the economy is good for the American people, and we invest so much money in military spending that it encourages the government to, have a somewhat outward foreign policy because it's good for the economy, and so they rely on the defense industry to maintain that level of economic growth.
As we know, as a result of these large entrenched interests within the U.S. decision-making, a lot of deals and decisions are made based on military prospects with countries in the Middle East and in East Asia. So how do you think these pan out, and what are their effects in the long term?
Sure, I think it's interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, what's good for the economy is good for the American people, but a lot of the time we have to go against some of our American ideals, like we're talking about in class, in order to maintain that economic growth. So, for example, it might be good for the American economy to provide, a terrorist organization with arms, and that's good for the American economy, but it goes directly against what America, supposedly espouses with liberty and democracy. So it's interesting because we have this pull of, can we maintain economic growth and, satisfy the people of our country? At the same time, we actually follow the beliefs that we have laid out in our Constitution and other, founding documents.
For our second guest, we have Joshua Hirsch, who is from Vice News on HBO, and he will be giving also a general overview of his opinions based off his experience in the field.
My name is Josh Hirsch, and I'm a correspondent for Vice News Tonight on HBO. When I was in Egypt covering the Egyptian Revolution, and then again later when I was there during the parliamentary election, so this is 2011, especially late 2011, there was a lot of discussion, and I did some reporting on this, about the fact that the Egyptian military was using tear gas that was manufactured in the United States and sold to them.
Hatem Naguib is the Chief Operating Officer of Barracuda Networks. He'll be our final interviewee, and he'll give a more in-depth and more dynamic overview of how the foreign policy is dictated and how the U.S. has kind of used its military industry, to its advantage in the recent years.
I am the Chief Operating Officer for Barracuda Networks. Coming out of World War II, we became a superpower. I think we recognized that to be a superpower, we had to ensure that our influence was able to be put wherever we needed it to be. And then we started to operate like an empire operates, where Europe no longer had the capability to defend itself. So we sent thousands of troops into Europe and set up bases after World War II. We did the same thing in Korea. We did the same thing in Vietnam. We now have, I believe, 60 or 70 bases around the world, including the Philippines and Japan, and that's part of the extension of U.S. power. It's also part of how we look at how we maintain foreign policy. I think that there is a relationship between the industrial complex that is military within the country, because it does drive a portion of the economic interest of the country. But I think we also, after World War II, recognized that we became capable and effective at exporting military capabilities, and began then the relationship between tying the civilian government with its foreign policy and, American national interests with us being able to sell and deploy weaponry around the world.